Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions versus Awesomers.com with my co-host Steve Simonson. Today we're going to talk about systems, but first, Steve, I'll share to the groups, and can you give everyone a little bit of background on yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, I know that we call it Awesomers versus Seller Sessions, but we're working together over here.
Oh yeah, of course. It's
a friendly rivalry. No, honestly, my background, everybody, is I'm an old e-commerce guy. I've been doing business for a long, long time, and I can say that systems have been a key foundation and something that helped us scale our businesses. And so we're going to talk about systems today. We're going to talk a little bit about why systems are important, my systemic philosophy, and how you can kind of replicate some of that philosophy. So it's a very good foundational type of discussion, and Danny is always very good at kind of shepherding these discussions and getting to the meat and the substance of it. And I have a nice calming background for you. I'm in a bamboo forest. There's nothing to worry about. It's just systems. Everybody loves systems. So don't worry. It's going to be fun and informative.
Excellent. So should we put some context? Do you want to share it to your screen? Do you have that JPEG to start with?
Yeah, sure.
And we can then we'll do a quick overview so people understand what it is, and then we can go step by step what these systems are.
Let me click on a screen and see if I could share this here with you. So share screen, because it does in fact help to kind of understand what we're talking about. So we're going to look at an application window, and we're going to, so I'm not going to go into presentation mode here, everybody. I'm just going to show you the system design process. So what works is having a system to create systems. And that's ultimately what we're talking about here. And I want everybody to think about your business from a systemic mindset. Danny, although none of us are perfect, myself included, at having systems and everything, I bet you that your best companies, your best success and profits you have systems in those companies. Am I right?
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, I'm just going to say you put systems in because you expected some result as the outcome you wanted. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and you take all the learnings from your previous businesses. Like especially on the agency side, when we built the agency, we had the technical team, and then I'm building out the back end of the business. And I basically thought I want to build a business taking all the pain points of all the other service-based businesses that I didn't like. And I'm like, okay, I've got an opportunity here to design that and take 10 years of business experience from these businesses, even down to not having a credit control department, right? Having everything automated in certain quarters and stuff like that, doing away with certain things that didn't work in other businesses that can be automated. So we were very keen at the very beginning. Whilst Ellis was developing the architecture, the technology and stuff, I was designing the actual business and what we wanted to see for the future.
I love it. That's really smart.
For the benefit of the guys listening on our joint podcast, I just want to quickly go through what these are like, because no one can see the screen. It says name it, result statement, design benchmarks, accountability, document system, establish standards, required resources, and design systems measurements. It's obviously because these guys won't be able to see it on the screen. But what we're going to do is we'll break this down for everyone, including those who hear us on the replay of the podcast. So now we've got an understanding with this. Let's bring you back into the screen, Steve, and let's start with why. You've asked me a couple of questions now, but let's get to the why of a system is important and why it's important to name it.
All right. So the first thing to understand is the name itself is not just a flowery, let's call this the money collection system. You want to have a structure, and so before you kind of name stuff, you need to define your system's architecture. Mm-hmm. Now that immediately people's pulse, they start racing. They're like, uh-oh, I don't know anything about this. But if you guys think back to the organizational chart, the functional organizational chart we shared a couple of weeks ago, that is essentially your system's architecture. Yeah. Right. You have a department, you have a finance department, a business development department, or marketing, IT, whatever the case is. And so you want to start with naming based on what you are trying to design. So if it's a finance system, maybe you just start with, FIN dash blank, right?
Yeah.
Finance slash general ledger, finance slash, accounts receivable.
Yeah.
And you want to think about those names because it is so important as you think in the future how people will read these, right? It's not how you will read it when you're writing it or when you're leading the development of these things, because everybody knows everything when you're writing it down. It's how will somebody look at it when it's a year from now, and having very clear things like you might say, business development is, biz dev or BI or BD, dash blank, and maybe even put numbers to it. My whole point is naming the thing is the beginning of creating a hierarchical, is that a word? Catalog.
Yes.
And I only say it because we often think about this at the end, and then we're looking in our folders or we're looking wherever we're storing this documentation, and it's impossible to read. And so we are really good at looking, like we can look for a SKU number and we can find any document, any kind of photo, video, anything related to that SKU because we always use the same naming conventions. So I really want people to take note of this and bring it to heart. And certainly if you're online, have questions. Why don't you give some shout outs there?
So just coming into the feed, we've got George is back. Hey, George. Elchin's back here as well. He says, hi, gents, good to see you. Eric Payne is here. Hello, Eric. And Elise is back. Abigail is here. Steve, what was the funky backgrounds that you were using for your design, she was asking.
I just find fun photos and I put them on my green screen back here.
Excellent. So Giselle's joined us. Juan is here. He also says, hey, Danny McMillan, good to see you again, mate. Thanks as always. And Michael Schneider is here, a Sing Ting as well. Welcome back, guys. Mark Steer has just joined the call. Anyone who got questions, that's fine. We can answer them there. The other thing I just want to quickly say is that, hello, Owen's here. He's back again. Thank you, Owen. Do you know, Owen, it's nearly 50. Next Thursday, I think it is. Thursday or Friday, it's going to be 50 shows in a row. So we have to do some sort of celebrational party there, Stephen. You'll have to come and join us as well.
Did you say what day is it next week?
I think I've got to do the proper count up, but I think it's either Thursday or Friday. It might be our joint show that is the 50th anniversary of doing 7 days a week.
Oh my gosh.
So, but just going back on point with the, just so people are clear, we are talking systems. We're not talking SOPs. SOPs belong as part of the system. They're part of the protocols that make the cog run inside, but you have to have an external system first before you can write the SOPs for each of those systems. Is that right?
Essentially, a system is kind of the hierarchy, the roadmap of the SOPs that might live down below. Yes. Right. So you start at the top of a system and you go, I need I have a finance department. I need a financial system. I'm going to call it, FIN dash whatever 100. And then, that might be the top of your heap. And then you say, okay, well, now I need a general ledger system. So I might call that FIN, dash 100 dash 10 or something, and you give yourself room to kind of numerically, and then you call that one general ledger, by the way, and then you might call the next one accounts receivable, accounts payable. But then at the very end of the system is where the real critical SOPs live. That's where people live and breathe and say, okay, well, to get the result at the top we want, we've got to have the SOPs kind of at the end of the system.
Makes sense. So we've come to the name it convention we've covered. Step number 2 is the result statement. I don't know what this is, so I'm looking to understand. What is the result statement? Do you want me to bring this up on your screen?
It's your call. It doesn't matter. I think you understand. Yeah, results. Yep. So I put on the American Indian dream catcher to point out that we're actually not just wishing and hoping over here. Okay, we are trying to find a specific result. A system should not exist if there's no intended specific result. And this result should be ideally quantifiable.
Yeah.
Right. So you can't just say, well, I want our business to grow and it's some little subsystem 3 levels deep in product launch. It's like, well, that's not a good enough result. That system should have a specific input and a specific output. And that result is often overlooked. We start making systems and we start documenting things, or we try to do our best to build a business, if you will, but without quantifying those results and then deciding, are those results even reasonable, we often get off on the wrong foot. And you brought, I thought, a very salient point up earlier, which was there's some stuff you should not do, right? And by putting this kind of systems mentality in place and then demanding a result up front, you can start going, you know what? We just don't do that anymore. There's a lot of stores in America now, by the way, that say we're not going to take cash anymore.
Yeah.
We don't want your cash.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure if they're going to be able to sustain that in the U.S. because of currency laws, and it basically says this money is good. But that is a reasonable thing to say. We don't want cash here. It's a pain. So no more systems for cash. Our system is give us a credit card. That's our system.
Yeah, it's the same as ours. And what I always say to clients as a trade-off when we don't have a credit control department. I always say to clients, the reason we can do this price and give you this through the agency is because we don't have a credit control department. If I have to employ someone to do credit control, you're going to have to cover those costs. And I wouldn't want to put those costs onto you. And suddenly, obviously, the credit cards kind of appears from nowhere. Whereas before they wanted to just pay. Do you see where I'm coming from? But that's part of the design of the system. So what you do is you look at it and you go, all right, what are the trade-offs here? What do you give back to the customer? Okay, no credit control department. You get a flat rate contract. There's no extra costs. You can add extra SKUs or whatever. Does that make sense? So you're always working out that there's the counter argument to that. I wanted to pay on. Yeah. It's
really the perfect example of taking we'll call it a weakness and turning it into a strength. We have some smaller companies and it's like, we don't have any interest in offering terms, right? Payment terms. And with payment terms, you need that credit control, or in the US, you might call it an accounts payable department. They have to chase the money, right? And then when they get the money, they got to account for it. They got to send bills. They're running reports. All of that stuff goes away by saying, we don't offer credit and we pass the savings on to you, right? That takes it from that, now I've got an objection from a customer into, hey, this works for me as a customer because I don't have to pay for these added layers of management and expense and so forth.
Yeah, because it's got to come from somewhere at the end of the day. Okay, so desired results. What's the next slide from here? Are we still here? We're working on desired result.
No, I think once you state your result and you quantify the result, I'm sorry, it's not quite centered for you.
Right.
It's it is what it is. So
it's
anyway,
live. It's live.
Yeah,
it's all
that's
good.
right. Benchmarks are another thing that you need to really consider. So results are kind of the high watermark of, hey, I want to launch this product and I want it to do $10,000 a month in sales. That's kind of the result of a product launch sequence, for example. Maybe you say, I'm not going to launch any product at the top level of that product launch that can't hit $10,000. But some of the benchmarks that you need to put in place are where some of the intangibles come in. Yeah. For example, you might say, I'm not going to maintain or launch a product I don't think can have higher than 4-star rating on Amazon. Or I'm not going to launch a product that takes 120 days of production time because the cash flow and the management of it is too complex. It's got to be 30 days or less or 60 days or less. So you have to have benchmarks that are both they quantify the nature of the outcome that you want, and they give some parameters, almost like what do they call those things on the side of the road that you don't drive off?
Barriers.
Yeah, like a driving barrier. There's another word we use in the US. Maybe we don't use it because I can't remember it. But the point is to keep you from driving off the road, you got to put these little guardrails. That's what they are. Yeah, the guardrails in place. And that way you say, okay, well, I'm about to do this process. Oh, it doesn't work. It didn't hit this benchmark. It didn't hit that benchmark. And it takes the emotion out of a lot of these decisions. Remember that all of us, it doesn't matter what part of your company you're working in or what part of your company your team works in, everybody gets emotional about the things that they're doing. If it's product launch or if it's finance or marketing or what have you, everybody has their gut feel and their instincts, but this helps take the emotion away. And so I think it's really important to get those benchmarks described early, and that way you can have a philosophical alignment as well. Make sense?
Makes sense. Cool. And next stage.
So now we have to ask ourselves, who's accountable, right? Who's got the job? You can see down here who's accountable. But if you don't have somebody who is responsible for the outcome, then you don't have a system at the end of the day. You just don't have a system. And I want people to think, even if they're the ones responsible out of the gates, again, as they hire people on that functional chart, they can figure out who are they going to assign this responsibility to. And I'll share a system here with you guys here in just a minute that will show you some of those types of things that you need to track and accountability and so forth. But just the very simplest thing, here's the system name, here's kind of the general result we expect, and here's who's responsible for it, can make all the difference in the world. And by the way, sometimes there's due dates. Maybe it is, once this system is initiated, you have 3 days to deliver. Sometimes these are called service levels, but internally, we have to have a predictable outcome, right? Both on terms of the result we want, quantifiable result, but also the timing. If you say, well, we're going to launch this product launch process and it's going to take, we don't know how long, maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 3 days, that's too much of a variable.
Yeah.
Danny, maybe you agree with this, but part of my objective with the system is to make things more predictable and less chaotic.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that also means that anyone who understands if the system's been put in place, people can fit into the cog of that. It's been engineered and optimized for the next person coming in. So ultimately, like you said, it controls the chaos, or it does away with the chaos, because people need to follow a line. Like, as entrepreneurs, we build the businesses, we have the vision for the businesses, but we need hands on the ground and people to take care of those systems in place. If you don't have a system, you don't have rules, it falls over.
Yeah, that's totally right. And by the way, generally entrepreneurs are terrible at execution.
Yeah.
There's, we can be really good at it for short periods of time. At least this is the case for me. I can be in the trenches and tactical for a short run, a very short run, a sprint. But when it's a day-to-day marathon, like the entire job is about those types of details, forget about it. I am the worst.
I'm going to say this in the kindest way.
How dare you?
In business, as entrepreneurs, you're exactly right. We get bored. We move on to other things. We want to see bigger picture, and we want to see people. We want to tell people what's in our head and go, right, execute that and get feedback from our team and everything else. But ultimately, you're an entrepreneur, or you're a safe pair of hands who can do that. I can't do safe hands. That's just not me. I can't run and do the same job every single day, get up at, start at 9. I can't do that. But people need that kind of structure in their life, and they're very good at it. And that's why you employ people to do those jobs. You put the right people in the right seats.
Boy, I can't agree with you more. I'll say it in a much less nice way. Yeah. If you suck at something, get somebody who's good at it. And I honestly, I have people on my team who love to do what they do, and I hate to do what they do, and vice versa, by the way. Every time I talk about, I'm wheeling and dealing, I'm doing this or that, they're like, oh, I would hate that, right? And so it's the perfect match. They do what they love, I do what I love, and that's when you really have the flywheel starting to turn, because they're responsible for their systems. I'm hopefully not responsible for hardly anything, but I get to do what I want to do. That is when you really have a company that is starting to find liftoff.
And in terms of your job or business owner, that is freedom as well. Being able to design something, hand that over to people. The only problem is, as you know, we have to go back and make sure these systems work. Sometimes we have to pull over the coals to go, why is that not working? So even though we're not hands-on, we still have to have understanding of what is going on in order to work out who's doing what and where things are going wrong and where the ship's being steered, because you still need to have that macro overview of what's going on in the business.
Completely right. This is why we have the accountability up front, and you'll be able to run reports. You'll be able to, frankly, when something breaks, it's really easy to kind of figure out what went wrong, because you just kind of track it back, your little systems, your tree of systems, if you will. And it really is something. So we don't manage by abdication, right? This is a big principle that was beat into me back in the 90s. We can't just say, listen, here's an SOP. Don't call me, I'll call you. That's not good management. If you're a terrible manager like me, then hire managers who are good managers. And then
when you say manager, right, we're talking about people management, and then there's workflow and work on the ground. I don't think you're bad at managing people, human beings. Like communication. Oh, you are?
Yeah, I'm terrible. I mean, I have built skills, so I can get by, and I don't have legions of my team trying to overthrow the worthless manager. But I'm very upfront.
Right.
Like I'll give you a classic entrepreneurial conundrum or paradox.
Yeah.
Like I love my people. They many of these people have been with me 20 plus years, 10 years. These are people I care about and people I feel genuine affection for, not just workplace camaraderie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it is very rare for me to call them up and say, hey, I just want to let you know you're doing a good job. You know, I noticed this thing that you did, and I just want to let you know I appreciate it. When they get that call, the few times that ever happens, it's like sending them just right over the top of happiness, right? They tell their friends about it. They tell their family. Sometimes we'll even issue certificates. But that is a giant chore to me. I can't remember it. And I say to myself mentally, well, they should know they're doing a good job because I didn't say they were doing a bad job. But that's not how humans work. And so this is one of the things that makes me a terrible manager.
But is that because of the size of the team, the level you operate at? There is a lot of people to go around. If you've got smaller teams, it's easier to go. If you've got a team of 10 versus a team of 200, it's very much easier to speak to those team on a weekly, monthly basis and say, do you know what? You're doing a great job.
I think it's not just the size of the team. It's honestly my own predisposition to saying they're great. They must know they're great. It's kind of like, you know, if you don't tell somebody how you feel, you don't tell somebody how things are going. By the way, when things go bad, I don't go over the top and yell at them either. Yeah. I definitely give very, very clear feedback, like, hey, this is great. And I'm a lot better at it now. So my whole point is it doesn't matter the size of the team. It matters your skill set. It matters how committed you are to developing them as team members, as humans, because ultimately you want them to grow with the company. Yeah. The person doing data entry today, if they're doing data entry 5 years from now, you really haven't done your job as a leader to manage them and bring their skills up and help them progress in the world. That's what we need to do as leaders and managers. And I'm not bad at it at this stage, but I'm certainly not as good as some of the managers that I bring in.
Of course. Yeah. That makes sense. Going to the next slide. So document system.
Well, I threw one in here maybe. So let's just check our thing. So documenting the system. So this is part of the required resource that I'm going to jump into first. So this is one of the things. I've got some raw material here on this slide, some lumber, right? What do you need to get this job done? Yep. And it is so essential that you think about these things. You take for granted that you already have login to Seller Central. You already have login to Fiverr, to whatever the systems that are needed. But all of those types of things need to be part of your documentation. And so think about all those required resources. If they need a credit card to perform this, all of these things are really, really important. And so required resources, don't take it lightly. Make sure that you are really, really good at this.
Makes sense. I'm going to say a couple of hellos, if that's all right, and some comments. So Owen says, whoa, come up to 50. It's been a blast. It's a bit like seller sessions on acid, he said, because of the 7 days a week. Abigail says, oh, I hear you loud and clear when we're talking about entrepreneurs earlier on, in that they're different to having the hands on a daily basis. Owen says, delegate and empowerment gives your employees ownership of what they do. Thomas says 100% same with remembering everyone's birthday, special days to them. And then he followed up with, I'm rubbish at that. Join us in the feed is Sab's in the feed here. Herbie's back as well. Rob's here. Tomas here. Dom is here. Sean Dyson as well. Jason Chew's back. Sarah's here. Singh is here as well. Okay, next step, Steve.
Well, I love seeing everybody, and I just want to let Thomas know that I'm also not good, but our system, when we put employees and teammates in the system, it will help us remember their anniversary and birthdays. And I'll tell you, it's the greatest help ever, because they love to have those anniversaries, you know. And by the way, I'm still not good at it. We don't have everything done. We have multiple systems, so it's not perfect. But when you remember and go, hey, you know, you've been with me, you know, I just brought somebody kind of back in. I sold a company. She stayed with that company for a while. She's just come back into the fold, and she started working with me in 1998. right?
Wow.
And we talked about it, and that there's a high level of kind of appreciation and affection between us. But I should put in the computer, and I may or may not have done this, that says, hey, her original start date was whatever, October 1st, 1998, so that we can talk about that anniversary annually. Those are really good techniques. So I'm with you, Thomas. Okay.
Excellent.
Now we're down to the actual KPIs. So system measurements. So when you measure a system, this is where the individual system must be measured. So at the top of the heap, you might say, I'm going to, maybe it's a sales tax system. And you say, well, I'm going to make sure that we are not late on our sales tax and that our cost for managing the sales tax is below some certain percentage of revenue, or whatever basis you want to make it. You define some kind of measurement to say, we got the system outcome. We maintain compliance of 100% or 95% if it's a fill rate in your warehouse, whatever it is, and that you were able to do it at some cost basis that was reasonable.
Yeah.
This is a big deal to me. What do you think about that, Danny?
Yeah, no, everything's got to be measured. And like what you said about a cost basis, we have to watch our numbers. Sometimes I'll feel foul of that. Like my team will send me reports and it sounds really bad, but there are times where like I get weekend and month end reports across all three of the businesses. But sometimes I've got a feel for the numbers and they've spent all that time building me the reports and I don't look at them. I find that I need to look at them when there's a bit of chaos going on. Does that make sense? But do you have a feel across all your business? You know where the numbers are sitting, right? You got a gut reaction to them. And so I think the structure of having the numbers there that others are following to make sure they're on top of the numbers and then notify me if I miss something. But generally, I should be better at that.
No, that actually, I really love the way you're doing it. So we have a general philosophy that if everything is within the norms of what you expect, within those guardrails we talked about earlier, then we don't need to get involved, right? The boss or whoever's responsible at the highest level, we shouldn't go in and try to interrupt and start asking questions because everything's running nominal. Well, just think of it like you're flying an airplane. Everything's in the green. Everything's fine. No loud noises, no red flashes. But the moment that something is above or below those measurements or those intended outcomes, now we need to get involved and we need to say to ourselves, wait a minute, why do we have red lights flashing? Sometimes we call this handle with human. If the system isn't handling it, we need to get a human involved and figure out what's gone wrong or right. By the way, sometimes you may exceed systems of sales and you're like, our sales are up, twice as much as we expected. What's happening here? You're not trying to put a stop to it, to be clear. You're trying to figure out what went right and really right, and then replicate it and lean into it.
How do we double down? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So although I want people, I think generally having benchmarks and having dashboards that show you kind of the nominal operation and a good system, either weekly or daily. Like, we look at our dashboards daily and we can see what's happening. As long as everything's nominal, then there's no problems. But the moment you start seeing those red lights flashing on your dashboard, you got to get serious.
Yeah. Herb's just come in here and said, in corporate America, we deal with call centers using KPI and employees only play to the KPI, like closing a ticket in X amount of days, no matter what, because they will get in trouble. Have you seen these challenges in your business? I think he's referring to is people circumventing the system just to keep the numbers looking good.
Yeah. So yes, Herb, I've seen every variation of that and then some. It's almost like when we create a system, then somebody finds a way to game the system. And you just kind of have to keep figuring out the guardrails to put in place. But there's a fine line and even for us, a predisposition to saying we want it to be easier to operate the system than to operate outside the system. And so if your system is so onerous or so troublesome for people that they feel like they have to game it, or there are such consequences for things happening, in my opinion, we have to really evaluate the rationale behind it and make sure that the things are aligned with our proper outcomes. In our call centers, for example, in the past, we've used, what's the average time on hold, average time in the queue, average time that somebody's talking to a customer. So if you have one person and they're talking to customers for 2 minutes and everybody else is talking for 5 minutes, let's say, that 2-minute conversation, something's wrong, something's different there, right? And you can look at their sales results or return results or whatever the other things. The point is, however you decide to measure these things, just look at it. And like on those trouble tickets that Herb talked about, if they're closing the thing out, even if they didn't resolve it, there's going to be some kind of customer feedback at the end of that says, hey, you didn't even fix my problem. That negative feedback will cause that system to rectify itself if we get it right.
Yeah, he's come back in and said, we eventually changed the message to be customer obsessed focus to employees. Do you want to elaborate on that? I think we understand what you mean, because you haven't changed the metrics. You just told the team, you're right, you've got to be obsessed with customers. But what impact did that have on your business, Herb, when you made, because that's a statement, that's not a measurement, if I'm getting this right. Yeah, agreed, Steve?
I agree. I think it's a fine message, but I'm not sure how that will resolve the problem. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, so let us know about that. Next stage, Steve. Right, so we defined system measurements. Yep.
So now we're measuring stuff, and now we have to think about standards. So what's the difference between the measurements and the standards, people might ask? And so standards are the things like, we want you, let's use the call center environment that Herb talked about. Let's say everybody's averaging that 3 minutes on a phone call and they're making the sale and everybody's fine. We want that to be a reasonable standard to live by. But for example, if somebody can make the sale in 2 minutes, that doesn't necessarily mean the customer experience is better. Our standard, for example, in that case is we want the customers to feel delighted at the end of the thing. So when they get that little review thing, that they have a feeling of satisfaction, 5-star delight, or the most practical way to measure customers is to see whether they would recommend you to a friend, right? This is the number one. Don't ask them how satisfied. I think asking for stars is good for all the reasons we know, but asking them if they would refer you to a friend or family member is the most highest predictable data point if you are doing a good job. And so those standards, like we want to maintain this standard of customer referrals, or there is a term for this that's escaping me, but having those general business standards, like we're not going to do the wrong thing, right? If a customer calls and yells at us, and demands us do something outside of our standards, we have to say no to that. Even if we lose the customer, that's okay because we have our standards. So this is like a moral compass. Yeah. Here's our company values. Here's what we believe, and we won't violate those standards. Does that make sense to you?
Totally.
Much more intangible than the system measurements, just to be clear.
Yeah.
So now that you have all the data endpoints, now is the point where you can really put it down on the documents. And it's not so hard. You just start at the top and you're like, here's the name. And then you write the result statement. And then you start writing, some of the inputs required. And you just kind of go down that list. It's not complicated, but it is overwhelming when you start going, I'm just writing one system and this took me an hour or a half an hour or 2 hours. And then your brain has the mushroom cloud reaction, which is, just imagine that nuclear explosion. It starts out like this. I'm going to get systems and I'm really committed this time. And then you get up into the mushroom cloud and you can forget about it, right? There's 0% chance you have of seeing your way through that thing. And so I just want to tell you, it's the one bite at a time, just one system at a time. And once you get enough of these, 4 or 5, 10 of these done, and you feel good about it, then you teach your team how to do it for the stuff they're doing. Yeah. It absolutely is something you can delegate.
Excellent. Yes.
Let me give you a couple examples when you're ready.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask you, but you kind of covered it, is that the mushroom is the overwhelm. Yeah. Okay, that's cool. We covered that. So next one, sales tax process. I don't like sales tax.
None of us do. We all hate it. But here's a clear example of how you just kind of diagram a system and carry on. It doesn't have to be pretty like this, but just all right, we need a sales tax process, so we start here. What's our result? We're going to comply with the sales tax requirements. And what does that mean? What are the components of that? That means we have to collect taxes, remit taxes, and then let's minimize the financial compliance burden, right? This is kind of the benchmarks and so forth that we want. So desired results, benchmarks. Who's accountable? Director of Finance, right there. What are the required resources? Well, we got to have legal opinions. We got to have software. We've got to have all of these other things that are in here. And then there are standards, that we have to comply with, audit rates and burdens and so forth. All of this stuff is just clear. And then we put some notes down here to make sure we get that in the document that says, hey, we have both federal and state issues. We've got to have experts on staff, or at least resources, external resources we can rely on. That's just a clear example of a sales tax system, kind of from beginning to end. This is the overview. It's not the weeds of it, right? The SOPs live down below in the review and remit process. That's a separate process. This is where you're going to have the SOP. How do you review the sales tax for the month? And then how do you send that tax to the appropriate state government? Does that make sense to you?
Totally.
So just for making this easy, here's what you do, right? You start at the top, you name it, go through all the steps we just talked about, and then you document it. It's just that simple. And to translate that, I showed you the sales tax process. We start, we comply, we collect, who's accountable, blah, blah, blah. It all is very, very simple at the end of the day. So, I'm kind of going through this stuff, but that's really all there is to it when it comes right down to it. I could show you one other thing. Let me share a different screen here, Danny. And this is kind of a project management view. So I showed you kind of a graphical view, but I'm going to show you a project management view. And forgive me if my computer's slowing down. It's old, like me. Application window. All right, I think this is the one.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, so people don't like sales tax, so let's look at product launch. They must like that.
Yeah.
All right, so when you launch a product, it has a series of tasks. So this is a kind of a project management view. First, you got to create your SKU, then you get a UPC. We add that item to what we call our master database. And by the way, each of these, if we click into it, there's more details. This is just kind of the overview.
Is this what program is this, Steve? This is an internal program that you built, or
this is Parsimony. This is the thing that I think we even give away the project management stuff free, by the way. So parsimony.com has lots of free stuff. Of course, there's some upgrade paths that we want to get people's money to pay for all this stuff, but everything that I do, I really try to talk about in a practical, real terms basis, right? Very, very little of this is ethereal. And it's like, well, it would be nice to have a philosophy talking about if a tree falls in the woods, doesn't make a sound. It's like, no, I need the product launch and I need to make it happen now. And every single one of these phases has a task. We can define who's responsible for it. There's timelines. We can put charts and responsibilities. Every little piece of it is highly easy to predict. And if you dive into one, and again, this is just a test one because we can't give away our secret stuff, but we can see who's working on it. We can see any details that would be for the task. We can check timelines, comments. Every little part of this is really, really integrated. And that's what you need to manage. And it doesn't matter to me what you use. I just like the fact that we can keep track of people's time. At the task level, they can turn in expenses. At the project level, we can actually turn in and do. Now you get to see. Oh, this gives you a really good view, huh? Look at all that. You can see all of these things with all these comments, and you can see purchase orders. You can see all kinds of things baked into the system. My point is, when it's really, really integrated and part of something, you can do some special things. And that's, we practice what we preach over here, not perfectly every time, but we certainly give it our best.
What percentage of your team are operating on this level inside the project management software? I've lost your audio, Steve.
About 100%. So one of the things that we do is that, inside a system, you can have the, who it's assigned to, attachments. But one of the most important things, and this is something I love, we can email from inside the system.
That's
and
what I
it
was going to
tags
ask
it.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask you. If everyone's on that system and the use of email, how are you collating that information? So that makes sense. So the whole team is in there. Yeah.
Even more, we avoid email where we can. So all of this is not an email. This is just an internal comment, right? So they put at Jessica, at Sherry, at Steve, and those pop up in our little system to say, hey, you were mentioned in this project or whatever. We also have gamified it, by the way. Who gets points for adding a project or a comment or whatever, so that their score runs up.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
I don't know if my screen is sharing or if I'm locking up on you.
I've still got your screen. We're going to come off this screen? You done with this bit?
It's okay. Yeah, you can come off it now. The point is we want to gamify it to whatever level we can. We want to integrate it to whatever level we can. And we have internal chats and things like that. Yep. My point is don't feel overwhelmed. Just start with one and work your way through.
Cool. We've got your screen is frozen at the moment, but I'll read out some of your comments. So I don't know if you just turn your camera on and off, and that might work.
Okay.
Thomas says, really pleased Steve mentioned the overload of writing system procedures, currently going through this, and it does feel like there isn't an end, but you know it will be worth it in the end. Troy says, this is awesome. When you had the slides up on the screen, Kwasim is back saying, hello, Steve and Danny. Happy to take any questions in the comments. We covered all the slides there, Steve. We've pretty much gone through.
We have, yeah. We've definitely gone through the thing.
Established standards, required resources, design system and measurements. Yeah, just want to make sure we covered everything. Just a quick one on COVID. I don't know what's going on in the US. If we've lost Steve, but I'll just let the audience know at the moment we got an announcement here in the UK. So we are locked down another 3 weeks. So me opening my big mouth and saying that we're going to do seller sessions live 7 days a week, you're stuck with me now for another 3 weeks until that changes. So anyone in the comments, if you want me to carry on going, happy to do so, as long as you're enjoying the show and you're getting as much as you can out of the content. I will also look at doing a 50th celebration next week, and bring Steve and a few of the other regular guys on. So I was just saying to the audience when you popped out, Steve, in the UK here, we've extended lockdown for another 3 weeks. So I said they're stuck with me. What's going on in the US on your end?
Well, I think it varies by state. My computer may be running slow, by the way, everybody. My apologies. But I can tell you that it varies by state. I would say, lockdown or not lockdown, people are going to use their brain. They have good common sense. At the end of the day, we now have more data and we can make good decisions about what needs to happen with this thing. It's impossible to stay locked down forever, right? So the lockdowns will end at some point. You can't test everyone, so that's out. And our politicians are such, wishy-washy, useless individuals that they want to do whatever is going to play the safest and the least risk. And so my guess is that people, I can tell you this, I have a badge, it's in my car right now, but I'm an essential worker, right? I have to work around and we're importing stuff and a lot of PPE. So I have a federal badge that allows me to go anywhere and do pretty much anything. That's right. It's a license to kill. And the objective is, my point of the story is that, 4 weeks ago, there was nobody on the roads. I mean, it was me and, nothing. Yeah. And yesterday I was out going from warehouse to warehouse and it was packed. And so it's, no matter what the government says, people aren't going to stay in their houses forever. And so it's going to change. And by the way, this is a natural evolution. It'll be fine. It'll work itself out.
Yeah, definitely. A few comments here. I asked if we'd carry on, and Thomas says 100% carry on. And Elise says, yes, please continue. Elchin says, please continue. Juan says, yeah, Danny, go forward. I love your show. Well, it's about the guests as well, so thank you. But the content comes from the guests, so let's make it clear. I ask the questions, they deliver on the content. I couldn't write and deliver all this content. I don't have the expertise in a lot of these areas. So I bring in who I find to be the best in the game. Cindy says, Danny, this is a huge commitment from you, but the content you bring is awesome and so much appreciated. Thank you so much, Cindy. I appreciate you and we appreciate you too. Steve, what podcast number will this come out on Awesomers?
So this will be number 185, if I'm doing my math right. So awesomers.com/185 will be published. And I'll probably even put some of these slides up, the graphics, if I can do that for me and find the time. We are behind because we are all hands on deck.
Makes sense. Guys, can you make sure you go to subscribe? You can all the podcatchers, if you like. So you're on iTunes. You're on what's the Android-based systems as well. There's multitude of podcatchers, as they call them out there. So make sure that you go and subscribe to Steve's show and go back through a lot of the origin stories and the history. He's got a lot of content, which is we call evergreen content. So you can obviously go back, dip in, and get good advice that hasn't dated, because they're generally general business areas as well. So Steve and I will be back, of course, next week on Friday, but you may join us he's so busy, but he may join us on Thursday or Wednesday. I've got to work out the 50th day, and then I'll put a post out about that. Tomorrow we've got Woman of Amazon in depth with Michelle Venton, talking about how she went from 0 to 8 figures and then exited last year for 7 figures whilst raising a young family and taking care of a mum with mental health. And then on Sunday, we've got Mindset Sunday, Law of Attraction, and Pay It Forward with Lee Rand Hirschkorn. In the comments here, Jamie says, thank you, gents. What was the name of the system Steve created and was using? Another 3 weeks of no sleep. Great work, Danny. So he's talking about the system that you're using internally in-house. Do you want to give him the name?
Yeah, parsimony.com, parsimony.com. By the way, parsimony means doing more with less to us. That's what we do. And I do want to just point out to everybody, Danny is sacrificing his life, right, for entrepreneurs. This is a extraordinarily difficult thing. He downplays it because Danny's Danny, right? And he wants to be a very modest guy, but this is a yeoman's amount of work. So I've just done the math on how many views that we get and how many views I've seen other shows get. And you guys are not doing your part to go leave him a review on Seller Sessions. Get on there, leave him a 5-star review. This helps it rank in the various platforms, including Apple iTunes. And leave him those comments and reviews, because that helps motivate folks like Danny and myself. Am I right, Danny?
Yeah, no, it's always great to get good feedback. I mean, I've always been open with downloads. We hit about 50,000 downloads a month now. We normally do between 35,000 and 40,000 downloads a month. But since doing the 7 days a week, that's gone up to 50,000. Obviously, it's a replay off of here. So, yeah, numbers are climbing. But for me, like, I've always trying to be hyper targeted to like the grown-up audience, as I like to call it, right? I'd rather have people that are like, yes, this show is about that advanced level of Amazon stuff. It's like, it's the grown-up show that you go to, because there's everyone who's got like the beginners, and they do brilliant with that. But eventually I know that the beginners will get their education elsewhere, and then finally they land at Seller Sessions. And that's our goal, is to be like, do as much as the advanced stuff for more like the business owners. And this is why, Steve, like, this is much more mature content. On a Friday when we talk to you, like you've done hundreds of millions in sales. You're like a unicorn within our industry. And the fact that you come on and share that at that level, it inspires other people to reach the same heights as you.
Well, yeah, it's kind of you to say, I do this for the same reason you do it. I love entrepreneurs, and not like I love nachos, right? People go, oh, I love nachos, right? That's not how I love entrepreneurs. I love entrepreneurs. I want to see people succeed. And I know you have the same values when it comes to seeing entrepreneurs succeed. There's genuine fulfillment. Yeah. Not a, oh, that guy, he got lucky, or, oh, that gal, she got a couple breaks or whatever. No, it's like, holy crap, they're amazing. I like to be around them because they're, as I like to say, awesome, not just awesome, but awesomer. And it's a true passion for myself and I think for Danny as well. So I really applaud what you're doing, and I thank you personally for doing it as well. No,
thank you. I mean, for me, Sunday, when we do Mindset Sunday, we're doing Law of Attraction. I know people see that fluffy and stuff like that, and what I call Pay It Forward. And I'd like to articulate that in much more detail. So anyone listening now, check in on Sunday. And I always try, like I call what you do, Steve, and what I do, we pay it forward. but I'll go into more graphic detail what that means, how the mechanics work of it, how it breaks down, and what what we call the returns from it. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't do things to then put someone's name in the spreadsheet to say you owe me a favor. Paying it forward isn't about that. But it is part of a culture that you do, and hopefully that enables others to do the same thing.
Well, I love that. I'm for bonus content. I will show you guys next week the spreadsheet that I have with all the people that owe me favors.
Yeah,
that's a
cool.
joke.
Excellent. Michael says, I like the grown-up show. Keep up the great work. Would you mind posting a link to where we can give you a review for your efforts, Danny? I, for one, would love to support the show with a review if that helps. You can post it wherever podcatcher you're on. iTunes is great because that's our biggest market of all of them. So if you've got an iPhone and you're on iTunes, just do a search for Amazon FBA or Seller Sessions, and you'll find us and leave a review there. That'd be amazing. On that note, everyone's making me emotional. I think it's time to get off now, and I'll see you again next week. What's the best way people can reach you, Steve? Through the Empowery? What's the best way?
Yeah, I think, you can go to the Empowery Cooperatives, empowery.coop, or you can go to awesomers.com. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm not easy to get to directly, I'll be honest with you. Yeah. But when people find me, I try to respond as often as I can. And I do love entrepreneurs. So if it is like, hey, can you give me a product that I can sell? I'm not going to respond to that. But if it's like, hey, I have this idea, or I have this question, I try to get to those when I can.
Excellent. On that note, stay home, stay safe, much love, take care of your family, and I'll be back here tomorrow, 4 p.m. as usual. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.